This is a video on output and input with Printf and Scanf. The syntax for a printf command is the keyword printf followed by open and close parentheses. The open and close parentheses tell us that that is a function or a subroutine, and inside there we can place parameters to pass into the function. And there is one required parameter, and that is the formatted string or the format string. Inside that format string you can have placeholders. If you do have placeholders, you need one variable for each placeholder that you make, and the variables must appear in the order that you want them used. Here's a short list of the placeholders that you need to memorize. There's some optional modifiers for the placeholders that aren't widely known. The first one is you can put a number between the percentage sign and the placeholder data type, and that will specify a minimum width. So when it prints out, it will take at least that number of characters. So in this example, I have %5d. So if the value is less than 5 digits long, it will pad that value with spaces until it is 5 digits long. The output by default is right justified, and if you want to left justify your output, you can put a minus sign after the percentage and before any number or data type value. So there we have % minus 5d, and so that will left justify the number. If you're using a floating point number, or you want to display a floating point number, you can specify a decimal point and then a number, and that will reserve space for the digits to the right of the decimal. So in this example, I have 8.5. The leading 8 says the output will be minimum 8 characters wide. The .5 says 5 of those 8 characters are going to be reserved for the decimal, or a portion of the number. And so that's how you use that. Of course, that works only with floats and double floats, single floats and doubles. The scanf function is used to read input from the user. Scan means scan formatted string. So it's a very similar syntax. You see scanf and then inside parentheses. Parentheses indicate that it is a function or procedure. You have a format string and one or more variables. Now, if you have a format string, that's because you're reading something in, so you're going to have at least one placeholder in there, which means even though you can have an optional number of variables, you still need at least one. Now, this is kind of odd. You have to place an ampersand in front of the variable names, except for all variables except arrays and strings. Now, why do you got to do that? Well, we'll get to that later in the semester. For the moment, I'm just going to ask you to trust me. There's a really good answer, but it's long and convoluted. I recommend you read in only one value per scanf statement. And now, why do I recommend that? Well, readability, of course. So, for example, if you have the following statement where you have %d, %d, that means you're going to be reading in 2 integers. You have ampersand int value 1, comma, ampersand int value 2. That's doing a lot per line. You're doing 2 things. So I recommend to do as little as possible per line, within reason. You can take that to an extreme. But, so for example, I would recommend that you split that single line up into 2, and so you have scanf %d ampersand int value 1, and then scanf %d ampersand int value 2, and it is much easier on the eyes. And trust me, when you are in a large project of 10, 15, or 20,000 lines, you want something that's easy on your eyes and easy on your brain. Now, this is really important. You can use only placeholders in the format string for scanf. If you try to put other characters in the same in the format string, you'll get strange and unpredictable results. For example, let's say you want to tell the user to enter a number and read it in at the same time. You'd think something like that would be possible, and so you'd say scanf, please enter number 1 to 100 %d, and then you put your variable name. Seems perfectly reasonable to do that, right? It won't work. You need to break that up into a printf statement and a separate printf statement and a separate scanf statement. So, for example, first use the printf statement to tell them what you want, enter number 1 to 100, and then use the scanf with only a placeholder for a variable and then the actual variable name. Now, I would like a volunteer to forget this. Anyone out there, please raise your hand. Okay, there we go. There we got one. Students love to put /n in their scanfs. They just love to do that, and when they do, boom, they get all kinds of crazy errors, and it usually takes them about half an hour to 45 minutes to figure it out. Sometimes they just get so frustrated they email me or they flag me down in class and they say, you know, I've been stuck in this for an hour. What do I do? And I said, oh, you've got a format statement in there. And so everyone seems to get burned by this once before learning the lesson. I've done the same thing. I've got the scar to prove it. So anyways, only format strings or placeholders in your format string. So everybody raise your right hand. I promise to use only placeholders in the format string of my scanf statements. Alright, so you all promised. So the printf and scanf commands are used for output and input. You will use them for the rest of the semester. If you think they seem primitive, especially in comparison to VB.NET, you are right. They are primitive. And you might ask, if they're primitive, how come we're using them? Because they're hard. Remember, this is boot camp. I'm going to take you down as low as I can go and make it difficult on you to build you up to make you a better, stronger programmer. And a great example of that was homework 1, which you should have completed by now. It wouldn't seem that difficult to find the minimum maximum value for a variable and to know what happens when you go beyond that minimum or maximum. Yet you've already been through at least one programming course, VB.NET 1, and you didn't learn that kind of stuff. Well, that's what C is about. It's about pushing the limits and finding out the nitty-gritty details, so how things work, so you have more control. That's why we're in software engineering technology. We want to be tougher, meaner programmers. And that is the end of this video.